Welcome to the Call to Farms podcast, a place where we explore the journey of food and farming. From our farm to your table, I'm your host tonight, Sophie, along with my husband, Tim.
How's it going?
And we are on a mission to inspire, educate, and connect you with stories from other local farmers and other real food enthusiasts of all kinds in pursuit of true nourishment. However, tonight we're just going to pop on and do a quick update since we haven't seen each other for most of the month of June. And I know we talked about this before. It was going to be a busy month for us, but thankfully after this month in July, August, things slow down a little bit before they pick back up again.
That's right.
So we wanted to do an update because today is the day that Dr. Stanton Hom posted his podcast interview update with us on his podcast, The Future Generations. We are episode 204. And after listening to it together tonight, we thought that we would pop back on because it sparked a lot of conversations around us. And we thought at the dinner table, so why not let's just hit record and share our thoughts with you. One of the things about the episode was that, we said that what you're hearing from our story now is 4 years after the events around 2020, 12, 13 years after we started looking into food and farming, after our first child was born. And I want to say 20 years from when you and I first met. So it's been a journey for us, and specifically around food, farming, but also I wanted to capture a lot of what we didn't talk about on the podcast interview.
Yeah.
But, if you've been following us, the story now is really beautiful, right? The book is doing really well. Our story is inspiring so many of you to reach out to us and let us know where you're at and what you're looking for and how it's inspired you to start farming and growing your own food wherever you're at. And I think that's wonderful. We love that. But we also wanted to keep it real because the events around 2020 really shifted our entire family, from my parents, our family, and the children. And it really shook us all up, that we really had to come to a place where we had to make a decision to make this, our story, beautiful. We wanted something that our children can take from the learnings of what we learned together as a family and making really hard decisions together, to have a day like today where we could be featured on a podcast like Dr. Stanton Hom or the Wise Traditions podcast, which honestly have been the two latest interviews, but have been the most enjoyable conversations and sharing with the hosts and all of the audience members. So with that being said, I wanted to flip the script again and take over the microphone to interview you with some of your questions around, how things have been for you as a West Point graduate, a Chinese American born firstborn son in your family, but I think also on your dad's side as well, correct?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it just sparked a lot of conversation. I think we just wanted to hit record because you and I were talking about it, and I thought it would be really good to share our perspective and capture your story for the children as well.
Yeah, we're going to go uncensored. You're going to hear my story. I'm usually the silent supporting partner, and it's good to have you back. And it was an honor to be on Dr. Stanton Hom's podcast. It was awesome because he's had some very notable guests, but it did spark this conversation. And where do I begin? Well, let's start with where we're at right now. And a lot of you have been following us, and thank you so much for listening in and tuning in to our Call to Farms podcast. You get to see how we are farming. We're homesteading right now. We have a micro dairy. We are doing it in East Tennessee. And it may look like quite a feat, quite a jump from coming from California, from Silicon Valley, in just a matter of a couple of short years. But there's a lot of backstory. You can read about Sophie because she published a cookbook with Chelsea Green, and it's really awesome. But tonight you get to ask me some questions and we get to go a little bit deeper here. And so I'll start off with saying my story is I grew up as a second generation Chinese American. So what does that mean? Well, my grandfather came over here and he fought in World War II. He came over as a paper son. And what that means is that back in those days, from China coming over, you couldn't just come over and do business in America. You had to be like a wealthy businessman in China. Now, my grandfather was not wealthy whatsoever. He was the eldest of all the kids, and his father, well, my great grandfather, had a bunch of concubines, but he was the eldest son of the first wife. From what I was told, he wanted to, well, I guess he was bucking the system even back then, and he wanted to leave and go to America. And so they found a businessman in my grandmother's village who brought him over to the US. And all he had to do was pretend to be his son on paper. So that's why it's called paper son. And the businessman's last name was Ing, which is my grandmother's last name because everybody in that village is named Ing. And so he was an Ing, came over, they were interrogated, and he was able to continue moving forward, even though they found out he wasn't really the son. The businessman had paid off the officials, and he started working in Chinese restaurants as a busboy and working his way up to becoming a cook. And he would send all the money back to China. I'm not going to give the long story version, but I wanted to let you know, like, this is where my roots started. And he worked really hard and he got drafted. This was in Chicago, and he got drafted to fight in World War II. And he served on the Western Front fighting against Germany because back then they didn't want to confuse him being Chinese with the Japanese and sending him over to the Pacific theater. Very interesting back in those days. And so he fought in World War II, and I was amazed because I actually majored in military history at West Point, and I got to dive a little bit deeper, seeing like what campaigns he fought in, and he was in Normandy, and it was like, wow, like I wish I had the ability to speak Cantonese back then, as a little boy and ask him about these things. I remember looking at the medals that he had in his bedroom, but my parents never pushed me to learn or go to Chinese school to learn Cantonese or Mandarin. Instead, they wanted me to assimilate into the American culture, embrace the American culture, speak English, speak it well. In fact, my father had me enter into a bunch of speech contests and essay contests as a little boy so that I could build up my confidence and be able to do public speaking, which I have him to thank for. It was an invaluable skill. So my grandfather, he fought, he served, came back, and then they passed the War Brides Act. So then he was able to bring over the rest of his family from China. So that's how my dad's side came over to the US. So he was first gen because he was born in Oakland later and went on to Berkeley. My mom came from Taipei, Taiwan, and immigrated over. So I'm second generation. There's a lot of expectations. I'm also the eldest of two sons. So there's a lot of expectations if you don't understand the Chinese culture, where there's just a lot of responsibilities that are on my shoulders. Like I have to perform, I have to do extremely well in school and just, get top grades and just do really, really well. I was essentially born and bred to go to West Point. I was really good at taking orders. I was really good at performing. What was your question?
No, I mean, I think that your parents didn't raise you to go to West Point. You make it sound like you make it sound like what people would think Chinese people do. You know what I mean? Like
okay.
Like, do they go to the Olympics? Like,
no,
that's
okay.
not. But
okay, I'll retract that. They didn't. When I was growing up, all my cousins and even my parents wanted me to go to Stanford, go to Berkeley. That was the American dreams, to work really hard, get straight A's in school, go to a prestigious university like Berkeley or Stanford and get a high paying job. Now, when I was growing up, I also fell in love with just studying about the Civil War. The movie Gettysburg had come out. I actually went to a Civil War reenactment and watched it as a little boy. I was probably like the only Asian kid there watching these grown men dress up as the North and the South, and
But
I was so fascinated by it.
let's be honest, we're also often the only Asian people doing the things we do,
That
which
is
is
true.
which
Even
is why we're hopping on this podcast to talk about why
even
sometimes
yeah,
we are sometimes the only Asian people who are in the communities we are in.
we are. So I don't feel like a fish out of water. It's fine. During that time, I was looking up the U.S. News and World Report, looking at the college rankings, and I was still in middle school, and I wanted to go to a top tier school. And all my cousins, I didn't do any of the same stuff they did. Like they knew how to the stereotypical things as Asians. They could play piano, they played tennis, badminton, got straight A's. I didn't do any of that stuff, and because of my fascination with the military, with the Civil War, I grew up during the GI Joe era. I think my dad saw that, hey, West Point would be good because it's a free school and it would be a great way for you to get a uniform, to serve in the military, and not have to pay college tuition. So he started pushing me towards it. And I was, interested in it, seeing that all these famous generals from both the North and the South came from West Point. And so it piqued my interest. And I applied for early admission, got accepted, and I went for it. I was like, well, I'm going to try something that's totally different from what all my cousins are doing. So let's see. But what I was trying to say is that all the experiences that I had leading up to this point and the way that I was raised to never really question authority, to always be obedient, listen to my parents, and to never question them. And just in our Asian culture, too, you're always being compliant. And more of a submissive thing, I guess, is like it's more polite not to not to argue or to make a stink about something, but to say, okay, well, if that's the way it is, or if that's what the government's saying to do, that's probably the right thing to do. And so I was, in a way, that's why I meant like I was bred to, or I was totally prepped to being successful at West Point because
You are susceptible to indoctrination.
sure susceptible to indoctrination. And at the time, I was like, I loved it because I'm like, wow, I get to go to this prestigious school, the best military academy in the world. And I get to be here where there were some, great generals, presidents of the United States who came and studied here. I get to wear uniforms. I get to serve my country. And so I just fell into it. And I'm not going to say I loved it. I would say, like, a lot of people always ask me this. They say, Tim, how was your experience at West Point? I'm like, well, it's not a normal college life. And so, but I would say that I do value the experiences that I gained, the relationships, the friendships that I made. A lot of people, they rush for a fraternity or sorority at a normal college. I feel like you're rushing all 4 years at West Point, where these are your brothers and sisters for life. And so that's one thing that I really love about West Point, is that my takeaway is that I do have these brothers and sisters for life, in terms of, we have a really strong bond. What and some of the skills that we did learn, some of the leadership skills, I did some takeaways from that I use for farming, like time management and being able to just make a decision based off of all the inputs that I'm receiving, just to make the best possible decision. But where I do push back on is that what you just alluded to is that indoctrination. There are a lot of things where you just blindly obey and just not question orders. In the military, they say you are not allowed to disobey any orders unless it's an unlawful order. Well, who determines that? And that is really kind of like on your values and like your morals, your moral compass. And that has come true, when 2020, the events that surrounded 2020, up until that point, I was completely compliant and obedient with everything. But you kind of helped me out there, opening my eyes, because your career is in marketing and in psychology. And you saw a lot of things that normal people, and even myself, did not see, but they were pushing it. A lot of the marketing was being pushed heavily, especially in California. And things were being done where just learning from your parents and being a military history major, just hearing some of the things that were going down where they were shutting down the grocery stores in California, we were on lockdown, and reminded me of some of the things that I read in history books and some of the things that your parents have talked about with the fall of Saigon, of, when the communists took over. And so we were living this in real life. And a lot of the skills that I did gain from West Point in terms of like instincts kicked in, but that's when I did start questioning the authority, because some of the things that you mentioned about the marketing.
Yeah. I mean, it's straight out of my marketing playbook. When you launch something, especially in growth marketing, to create the anticipation, the fear of missing out, right? All of the scarcity play, a lot of the marketing strategies that have worked well for me in my career. And also having my master's in clinical psychology and being able to read people. This is why, again, that is one of the core tenets of how we homeschool, is being able to read through the marketing, read through what people are saying and seeing what they're trying to do. And one of the things that I want to talk about too, that you and I were talking about, was in psychology, in our world, we have something that we would call you being the golden child, right? When you're talking about parents with narcissism that we're dealing with, and how they groomed you in a sense to be their supply as a golden child, having to perform and only having to do the things that they approve of in order to gain the conditional love that they offer. I know this is a tough conversation, but this has been I want to say, at least a 10, 11, 12-year journey for us. At the same time we were discovering food, we were also discovering food marketing, as well as really looking into narcissistic personality disorders.
Yeah, I didn't realize that this was a thing. I mean, we had some marriage issues when we first got married, and I didn't realize that it was stemmed from my upbringing. But what you were just talking about right now, I didn't realize narcissism was a thing until I started reading some of the books, and I was starting to get some counseling on. I didn't realize that ACON, adult children of narcissists, is a real thing. And I thought growing up, I felt, well, maybe other Asian kids feel the same way. They're being, being told to do these things, and you have to perform. And if you don't, you're shaming your family and this and that, yada, yada, yada. But that's really conditional love. It's not what we're taught in America or what we're trying to teach to our own children. And this didn't get brought to light until we had our own children, because we started questioning, like, so what is the best way to raise our kids? And, as parents, we always fall back to what we learned from our parents. But I also realized too, in unpacking this, because we wanted to have a healthy relationship, a healthy marriage, to be able to model this with our own children, then we have to do a lot of healing within ourselves. And I discovered that I had a lot of things that were really inside me. I had to unpack it because I just buried it inside. And so this idea of like narcissism was something that is a real thing. And it was really hard for me to come to terms with the fact that both my parents are narcissists. And because of that, I had to set up healthy boundaries so that our children or daughters would not feel this sense of having to perform in order to gain this conditional love, and never wanting my daughters to ever feel less than because they are not sons. And that's kind of like to the extent of, I'm kind of alluding to what the expectations were, in our culture.
In our culture, you have it, specifically, even in your family, you have an uncle who has two daughters, and
he's older.
Right. and and
So he would be the golden boy because he's the eldest son,
right.
and my father wasn't the eldest one. But because my father had sons, then he felt that he won, and he made a comment, which it sticks in my mind to the point where if he says this about boys versus girls, then it stays in my mind that he was disappointed that I had daughters. And that's something that I never want my girls to ever feel. Never want them to feel less than. We always want to be able to equip them with skills. We want them to have these experiences. We want them to feel loved all the time. And that is something I just did not want to expose them to. And just unpacking everything and learning more about narcissists, and I just had to come to terms with this. Now, I love my parents. They raised me. There are a lot of good things that I did gain from growing up from them, but at this point, we don't have a relationship because I've learned that this is how they are, and I want to be able to have a healthy relationship with my children. And so that's been really, really hard. But I also realized in this journey that I'm not alone. And I think this is what you're about to talk about, is that we've been finding a pattern from those who have been abused, those who have gone through trauma are the ones who have been awakened by the events of 2020. And I've also found that many of my own classmates at West Point, they're not awake like that, but I found that a lot of them have parents who are narcissists. So I think almost to the point where I probably should be creating a Facebook group on this, because I think there's quite a bit and we do need help because that's not healthy at all. I'm just finding a common pattern here, like a trend.
And I think that's why, you with Alex Zach and you with Stanton
Yeah.
Hom, I think it's just beautiful because I had found Alex Zach around 2020, Dr. Stanhom, same thing around 2020 when they were talking about just health freedoms, and Dr. Stanhom being from California as well. He was at some of the events that I was tracking during that time as one of the speakers. And I thought, wow, how interesting that these two guys are West Pointers.
Yeah.
And here we are. We like to live our lives pretty private. And, it's really hard for us to put ourselves out here. Like, it is extremely difficult, especially like from our culture and our backgrounds and everything. But we do it because the comments that come in, the people that reached out to us and hearing our story and feeling that they're not alone is the motivation for us to continue to share our story so that you don't feel alone. And it's from all different walks of life too, that we're seeing. I mean, which is just beautiful, because when we started finding our people based on values and not on interest, after 2020, I realized that how we all come from different backgrounds. There are some white collar mixed with blue collar, mixed with different ethnicities and different religions, and not even religions, even people who are completely atheists, and then just questioning the events around what's going on.
Yeah.
Has been really interesting to see. And the people that reach out to us, all of it has been just so interesting, because we tend to talk about food and then we talk about farming, but it's just beyond that.
Yeah.
When you get a little bit deeper with everybody and realizing that, I think the one thread that ties us all in together is the fact that, from what I can gather, is that we've all had to heal from a very abusive relationship. So much so that we know that whenever there are warning signs of an abusive person, for us, it's narcissism in what's caused abuse in our lives, and some physical. But from that, we've healed ourselves to know that these are the warning signs around 2020, 2021, and that we are saying, no, we do not accept.
Right.
And then coupled with, marketing and business senses, and over the years, that we're just adamant about where we stand, and we're very strong about where our boundaries lie.
Yeah.
And the people who we meet there are a series of questions. Like I was just telling you, I
Mhm.
think I've become socially awkward because I ask the questions based on values, and it helps me determine to see if we can go further than just a superficial level.
Mhm.
And maybe I I told you, like, maybe I should just calm down a little bit, but I think that we've reached a point in our lives where post 2020 and all of the, again, what you're seeing is the beauty of our story now, but we've had a lot of loss of relationships and financial loss in investing in our homestead in California and then having to move it out here without, having a lot of time to build up any equity. But
Well, yeah, and I wanted to say also that we were really deeply plugged into the matrix, and at the time, I was following football, I was doing fantasy football, but to your point, we can't just be making friends with based on common interests. Because I mean, who doesn't like to go out? Who doesn't like to go out to eat and things like that? But when it comes to where it counts, like where your values are, and at this point, we just don't wanna waste any time. If we wanna be friends and go deep, then we wanna make sure that we have a solid foundation. Like,
right.
where do you stand on these things? Because if we know you stand on, which way, I mean, it's like, well, then we can't really go much deeper than that. And if we're not gonna go much deeper than that, why are we wasting time? Like, we're gonna waste your time, we're not gonna waste our time. And it's just, I know it may sound like harsh, but at this point, like we're in our 40s now, it's like, okay, well, this is the state of the world. This is the state of the union, in a way. We've gone through quite a bit, and there's still quite a bit more to learn. And this journey has just been so beautiful because we've it's almost like we're coming full circle now. Like we've lived that. You and I have both been growing up the obedient Asian children, focusing, doing well in school, and then we rose up and did what our parents told us to do, and we got high paying, jobs, careers going, and then because of all the trauma and the experiences that we've had, we were able to see what was going on in 2020, to wake up to it, go back to our roots and start farming. And even in my story, I was just talking about, like, I'm like the most unlikely candidate to say no to this and pick up, something and start doing manual labor. Like, if you've listened to any of the podcasts from beforehand, it's like I'm unlikely candidate of doing this. And here we are. We are in it. We've got a micro dairy. We even just got a couple more tiny homes that we're working on right now on the farm. But it's like we're doing it right now because we want to help inspire others and show others that it is possible to do this. We want to help prevent others from being hurt. We want to help equip other people with skill sets and experiences that we've gained through this. And we've moved at such a rapid pace. We've ramped up so quickly, but only because we were able to identify these indicators from the very get-go so that we could stay ahead of the curve here. And we've been always doing this because we want to be able to help out our children, like, and set up a lasting legacy. We keep talking about this, like creating a legacy, and that is equipping them with skills, but helping them learn from our own experiences. Yes, we're constantly trying to work within ourselves to make ourselves better. We're doing it for them. And I know a lot of other parents out there listening, or if you're doing it for your loved ones, like, I'm sure you're struggling with it. It's just like there's just so much negativity going on the news and everything, and you're trying to figure out, like, what are we going to do? And then the prices of everything going up, from gas prices to food prices to, we're in the real estate business and seeing the interest rates, and there was no cuts whatsoever this year. So it's like, okay, well, what's going to happen? And the one thing that we came to the conclusion to is that what we can control is that we can grow our own food at this point, like the best that we can, so that we can nourish ourselves and we can help heal our bodies through it.
Yeah, but also going back to learn some of the basics. Like
Hmm.
today I made, because I'm about to take off again, so I made a bunch of applesauce from the bulk apples that I bought that were closeout, and went before I left. And
Hmm.
then I made some strawberry, no, cherry jam,
Cherries.
and I was making it, and mom was like, she made a comment. So I have to get this because I don't want to forget this, because mom rarely gives me for any compliments. But she said, I can't believe that in just a few years, I've watched you just learn all these skills and to be able to be where you're at.
Yeah.
I mean, they're simple. It's just that in our culture, we don't make applesauce. We don't cook our fruit. We don't cook our fruit. We don't make jam.
Mm-hmm.
But she loves jam. We love applesauce. It's just something you buy in the grocery store. So how funny is that?
Yep.
And so, and I told her, look, this is it. That's all I had to do was put a cinnamon stick in here, and there's no sugar, and it's just a natural sweetness from
Mm-hmm.
the Fuji apples. And she just loved it. And I was telling her about, appeal and
Mm-hmm.
how I don't trust the coating of sprays that's now deemed organic
Right.
through Gil Bates, how they're in Whole Foods and a lot of these stores that are considered, more natural.
Yeah.
So just having that conversation with her and, knowing that she's sharing that out with her friends and her community. And
Mm-hmm.
I think we're looking less and less crazy. I think people, I just got back from the Vietnamese church conference with Mom in Houston yesterday. And we were having so many of these conversations that I think back 4 years ago, the same people would have called us crazy or would have told us to calm down and everything's going to go back to normal.
Yeah.
But here we are having actual conversations about the validity of like all the books in the Bible, or, the feasts and the festivals and the holidays. Like the conversations are starting. I wish it had started earlier, but it's happening now. And, unfortunately, some of these things that, as again, in our Asian culture, we just have complied and listened to authority. It's,
Mm-hmm.
what's done is done. But I think that I'm grateful for having the Nourishing Asian Kitchen cookbook,
Yeah.
because that is a starting place where we can have a conversation about food. And when you start questioning food, you start questioning everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to hop on and hit record because I wanted something for the children to hear. And we have some interviews. Like I want to interview Mom on the podcast as well to get some of the reasons why her stories in the past have given me foresight into what might be coming, right? Based on what she's witnessed. And I've had so many conversations. So it's just in the Bay Area for a tour at Google. And one of the people that came and attended was telling me about how she had stories about her parents in Poland and how they had the same thing with lockdowns and curfews, and that people would get shot.
That's right.
The way that Mom and Dad said in Vietnam, you'd get shot.
Mm-hmm.
And in California, we had lockdowns and curfews.
Yeah.
And it was a scary time. A lot of people around the country may not have remembered that, but in California we were it was pretty bad. And again, coming from our experiences in marketing and in the abusive relationships that we've had and the unhealthy relationships, and just being able to identify the red flags just helped us say, no, we're not going to comply. And it's something that 4 years later, we can talk about it. And we need to talk about it. I feel like we've been closeted for the last 4 years, and especially during that time, not sharing it. And honestly, when I was at Google earlier this month, I just said, I'm done. This is who I am now. I'm not the same, and I'm grateful for it. And because I'm not the same and have a book to show for it and have been invited to speak at some really notable conferences, I feel really happy to know that this is where, when you lean into your gifts and you just accept yourself for who you are, and the mission that we're on is so much larger than what other people may think of you or your story or how you present and things like that. Like, it's still such a more impactful thing that we're doing now than what I was doing 5 years ago.
It is. And everyone has a story to share. And I'm glad I'm able to share mine today because I really haven't had an opportunity to really share a little bit about my past. It's not something you broadcast, but I think it is important to understand because as a homesteading realtor, I get to work with a lot of clients. And the best part about being the realtor is that I get to be a part of their journey. I get to
Mhm.
be a part of their story. I get to learn a lot about the why, like why they're making the move,
Mhm.
the change. And it's just so beautiful. I love being a part of it. You get to be a part of it as well. And now that we're homesteading, I joke about it, but we have so many litters of dogs. That's what we give as housewarming gifts. Like I provide an LGD puppy to my clients. Now, as long as they have proper fencing in place, there you go. You have security. And I was joking about it earlier today at a closing because I said back in the Bay Area, we give these Ring doorbells out as gifts. Oh my gosh, just feeding the beast and the big data. But it's like, oh, that's
Right.
supposed to secure you, the Ring doorbell to
Right.
let you know. And like, well, nowadays it's like, here's your puppy. And as long as
It's a
you,
lot better than a Ring doorbell.
it is, it
A lot
is.
more effective.
So I'm sharing this because I really love what I do. And I love helping others be able to achieve their dreams of not just home ownership now, it's about growing their own food. And it's just very empowering. And I want to be able to share my story with you out there because I know you have your story and you may have things that hold you back. Don't let it set you back because I was the most unlikely candidate to be where I'm at today and just growing food and helping other people. And that's exactly what I want to do. And I was just mentioning this to Dr. Stan Hom too. Like, even though we're out of uniform, our mission today is still serving others, helping others who can't. And I want to be able to inspire others and equip them with the experiences that I've gained and the skill sets that I've gained, but be able to do whatever I can to help others ramp up as quickly as possible, learn from my own mistakes so that you can get there faster. And I hope that just by learning a little bit about me and our mission, that it will explain why I do what I do. If you have any questions, like actually, let's talk really quickly about the state of the housing market because I want to just touch on that real quick. That I get that question a lot. Like, Tim, what's it like out there right now? Is it still really, really hot? And I would say that
Well, let me
talk talk
go.
talk about the
Yeah,
rates
I'll talk
first.
about rates
Yeah,
because I think that that's critical
it
to
is.
how the housing market is performing.
Mhm.
And if many of you were following last year, end of last year, the feds were announcing that they were going to do 6 rate cuts this year. And we had a lot of clients, and we've talked about this too throughout our last several podcasts, earlier podcasts,
Yeah.
where we had clients who said, well, we will just wait since 2024 is going to be an election year. We really think that rates are going to drop. And then October, I think we were recording our podcast and saying, like, something just happened because every client of ours who said that they were going to wait for 24 just jumped in on it. And that was when in October we hit 8%. And everybody who was like waiting for rates to drop back down realized that it wasn't going to drop down and it was going to continue to climb and freaked out. And I would say that that was the best move that could have happened. Well, the feds announced late last year that they were going to do 6 rate cuts. And I
Hmm.
thought, how is this going to happen? Because of all of the news around Ukraine and Russia. Well, then in March, they said, well, in the first quarter that we would do some rate cuts. That didn't happen.
Right.
In March, the feds met and they said, well, we're going to do 3 rate cuts instead.
Hmm.
Still no rate cuts. And just in June, they met again and said, actually, we're not going to do 3. We're going to go down to 1 by the end of the year. And I remember late last year, I kept thinking, I don't possibly see how rates could drop in 2024. But I wasn't in a position to say that to any. I'm never in a position to say that to any of our clients. Like, I don't have a magic 8 ball. I have no idea. Nobody does. If you're listening to our podcast, I've got to assume that you know that all of our systems are manipulated, right? Including our financial system, our education system, our food system,
Hmm.
every single system, medical system, right? Everything. So knowing that and realizing that we just don't know if rates are going to drop and you can't plan for it. One of the things that I would want to leave with you is that you are not investing in the rate. You are
Mhm.
investing in your home, you're investing in that property, you're investing in the land that you're growing your own food and growing your own food. And when you do, every time I see an egg, we pick up an egg, or we just harvested our first cucumber today,
Mhm.
I feel like I'm printing money. So that's where the investment is. You're not investing in the rate. The rate is something that you can always refinance. And that's what that's what we do. That's what we did in 2021 when rates dropped and continued to drop. We ended up refinancing 3 times in that 18-month period.
Yeah.
So, anyhow, all that to say is the Feds have announced that they are making one rate cut by the end of the year. Whether or not you think that may happen is something that's completely up for debate. It is still the election year, and the elections happen in November. But make your best judgment. If you are in a position to purchase, if this is something that you're wanting to do, my advice would be do it, because again, you're investing in the home, you're not investing in the rate.
So there is a lot of hesitation because of like what Sophie was mentioning, because of where the rates are. When you sell, what are you going to be able to purchase from there? Based off of the rates, like what the monthly mortgage payments are going to be. So I do sense a lot of hesitation in the market. And there are still two classes. There are people who are still dreaming and others who are doing it. Those who are doing it, they have made appointments with me. They've actually flown out here and they've gotten it done, and we've gotten it done together. And
We
there's
have 2 clients that flew in the last month in our closing. We just had a closing
they did.
today and another one next week.
We just found the right properties for them, checked the majority of the boxes.
Actually, three clients
3 clients that we
that
helped
just
out.
came in
That's
and
right.
they were like, we got to do this now.
Because they're serious. They're doing it. And then I have others that are dreaming, and I don't know how long. And they tell me, well, I just want to buy land and I'm not going to move for 8 more years. And it's like, well, then you're not really looking. And they think they have a lot of time, or let's see how the elections play out, yada, yada, yada. Well, if you're in that camp, it's like, okay, well, then I guess you have whatever time. But you know what? As Sophie mentioned, though, like you're never going to be able to outsave the market where it's at right now. And if you know in your heart of hearts that you want to grow food, then you're probably like us and wish that you did that 5 years ago or 10 years ago, right? And had an even earlier start so you could build up that equity and actually grow out your farm and rebuild that soil. So if that's something that you want to do, reach out to me and let's just get this journey started. There's never any pressure on my part. I want to be able just to provide you with options, but this is what I'm seeing in today's market.
Mm-hmm.
So if you see a good deal out there, like you should just act on it. You need to just get more information on it. Reach out to me. I have the free guide, and I'm also going to be putting out a property buying video series, and that's coming out soon in the next month.
Yeah. That's exciting. I'm really excited for
Mhm.
that. It'll answer a lot of the questions
Mhm.
from the clients that we hear, that are common questions that we hear
Yeah.
about in the course. And I think that it'll be really good for people to just go through.
All right. So that was the housing market update. Let's talk a little bit about your book tour. How'd that go in
Yeah.
California?
Right. So we kicked it off at the Hack Your Health conference. I did a couple of food demos there, had the children with mom as well on stage with me. We made Asian keto meatballs and used some nutrient dense items like organ meat seasonings. And so that was exciting. We had a great time there, met with Mary Schrader and her husband and her son. Mary Schrader is Mary's Nest on YouTube and on Instagram. Such sweet, genuine woman, and so excited to see her again at the Modern Homesteading Conference that we're headed out to very soon. And then after that, I went to Google in the Bay Area. So I was invited to go to Google headquarters, and it was a very private event. I couldn't talk about it beforehand. They were afraid that people were going to show up and they'd have to turn them down. And then from there, it's just been so back to back and very busy since then. But while at Google, we did a rooftop tour. Again, I had mom and the children. So it was really special to share that with them because I hadn't originally thought about doing any of the tour with them. It was just going to be me and just knocking it out so we can just have as little disruption in our farm life as possible at home. So I wanted to thank you for taking care of all of that while we were gone for like almost 10 days or so. So while we were there, it was great. We did a whole rooftop tour, and it made me think about when I heard Joel talk at Google and how he was challenging Google to create a more sustainable way to grow their own food and manage their own food waste for the cafeteria back then. And so to see an entire rooftop garden, and they have quite a few garden spaces around the Google campuses in the Bay Area. And I think leading the charge against other tech companies. But it's just great because they're teaching other Googlers how to grow their own food and what to cook with them. So it was just, I mean, incredible benefit to be a Google employee in a sense that from there, I also taught them after the tour, I taught them how to make a vegan japchae, which is a Korean dish with sweet potato noodles, stir fried, based off of all of the ingredients that you can find at the farmer's market or on your rooftop garden, your balcony garden, or if you have a farm, you know, anything that you have that you can just stir fry together. And it was extremely simple, telling them, you know, our story of having modern conveniences like our groceries delivered to our door within an hour. I would have it timed and ready to start cooking at 5 o'clock when I was working those crazy, crazy days. And so it was great to be able to share that. The team at Google was amazing. I had some really great questions that I fielded. One of them at the very end actually got me in tears because it was also another Asian American Googler and had asked, hey, you know, with your careers, they had done some research on me and my LinkedIn profile. So they said, like, with your career and getting to where you've been, how was that conversation with your parents to tell them that you were going to leave everything behind and start farming? So, you know, I told them the truth and was completely vulnerable about it. It's not been easy. Again, like what you're hearing is the beautiful side of our story, but there's a lot of cultural things in our past and the weight of all of that and the importance of it, you know, and honoring our parents is we still honor our parents, but we still have to choose to live our way. And the world has changed a lot from how we're growing up and raising our children to how our parents raised us. And I often tell mom and dad how easy it was for them back then, even though they had to work their full-time jobs, 2 full-time jobs, mom did, and to make ends meet. But all they had to do at that time was make sure that we did well in school, went to college, got a good job, and, you know, that was success. For our generation, it's a lot harder now because technology has really become something that, yes, started as a modern convenience, but now with the onset of AI technology, it's something that's going to really disrupt the job market for the next generation. And interestingly, while I was in the Bay Area, there was a webinar that I was attending online. And while I was monitoring the chats that day, there was an old mentor and colleague of mine that was part of the chat. And so we connected. And ironically, I had just said, hey, you know, I would love to grab coffee sometime. And he thought that we were still in the Bay Area. So what's interesting was that by that night, he had invited us over to his house in Palo Alto, right across the street from Stanford University. And we were just talking about the relevancy and how we stay relevancy, how we can stay relevant in the world of AI that's coming. And he's been tracking everything within the different industries and how it will be disrupting every single industry that we're in. As much as I have taught the children that the future is just something that we know is going to be completely different, that we don't really want to embrace all of this, I've realized that in order for us to beat the system or buck the system, we need to be able to understand the opposing forces, right? So use it to our benefit, know how to use it for the benefit, and to be cautious with it as well. So it was a great trip. After Google, we had such a great time there. I had such great feedback from everybody that the following days I met with several Weston A. Price chapter leaders. We had separate luncheons. And so we had set up another luncheon on that Thursday with a whole community of people who were interested in Weston A. Price food and farming. So it was great. We had a private tour of the Mountain View campus at their food forest that they've built together on campus in Mountain View with one of the farm hands at the Sunnyvale campus that he just made a special trip out and gave us. I think there was like 25, 30 of us that came together. And my dear friend Joy from SoCal drove up to help me with this tour. And it was just great to have her there to take care of a lot of it for me, honestly, because I'm still working. So it's good to have her there to just manage the meetings, the conversations. And so all I had to do was just be there and show up and be there for people. So it was really good. And then after that, I was at the Berkeley farmers market where I did another cooking demo. It was another vegan japchae with the Ecology Center. That went really well. And then I had a book signing at Book Passage at the Ferry Building in San Francisco, which I think my fondest memory was the very end when I was walking, and Joy is such a sweet friend. Like, she is the one that's like raving about the book to everybody, and I am just like mortified. But we got to a place called the Fatted Calf where they had some beef jerky, Korean barbecue beef jerky. And she was like, my friend here just finished her book signing, and we were just walking around, and turns out he loves Asian food. And we ended up bartering a book for some special beef jerky for you. And I was really touched. Like, it's one thing to like buy, with cash and that have that transaction, but it's just so much more special when you can gift something of yours of value and they also feel like they're gifting you something worthwhile of theirs for something that they value of yours. And I think it's just so beautiful that we could do that this day and age in the Ferry Building, where people are probably paying by Bitcoin, but yet here we are just transacting with this bartering and this trading system. And I loved it. And I loved bringing that back home for you because it's special.
It was very special. Thank you. Well, you did quite a bit. I'm glad we're going to be slowing down soon for a little bit of a break. But we definitely wanted to come on and just pop on, give you a quick update. I'm always so amazed when we go to some of these events and the people come up to us and they let us know that they listen to our podcast. And it really is humbling to hear that, because we started this, as Sophie mentioned before, we did it so we could just document it for our children so they wouldn't think we're crazy of the journey that we've took them on, coming from California, where if you've lived out there, people are like, why would you ever want to leave? And coming over to the other side now, where we're in Tennessee and we're farming. We want to document it. And this podcast has grown quite a bit. interviewed some really amazing guests. And as we just started off with this podcast, we've also been interviewed ourselves by some pretty cool people. And I really love the opportunity to be able to be interviewed with you as well. And it's been really special. And I love being on here as well because we just get to share. And sometimes, half times, we think we're just rambling. And we hope that you do glean some bits of knowledge from our ramblings. But it's really cool when I talk to new clients and they let me know we listen to your podcast, or even if we go to some of these homesteading events, it's really cool to hear because that's awesome. We just want to do as much as we can to help you out as best we can.
Yeah. Well, it started off as what we called our pretend podcast. Pretend. And, it was just fun. Like our first guest was the children.
Yeah, the children, and then we're interviewing ourselves, and
yeah, and we were just talking.
Here we are now.
So it's fun. I still think it's our pretend.
It still is
podcast. We're here at the kitchen table, so it's good. It's good. And we are going to be at the Modern Homesteading Conference in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho this weekend. I don't know when we're publishing this.
I'll try to put it up. So I'm going to not really edit much to it. So what you see is what you get. And we hope to see you there.
Yeah. And I'll be doing a book signing there. So it'll be really exciting to stop on by. I'll be at the Melissa K. Norris's booth, Pioneering Today. And also you'll be co-sharing a booth with
Chef
James Berry.
Who was our last guest.
Who was the last guest on our podcast. We tried to get that up before the event. So, yeah.
I'll be selling our famous pho spice mix bags that our girls put together. And I will also be selling a lot of our Call to Farm swag. So if you want to get a hold of one of our cool hats or t-shirts and hoodies.
Hoodies my favorite.
Those, yeah.
Yeah.
So I look forward to seeing you there.
All right, everyone. Have a wonderful time, and we'll see you next time. Until then, stay healthy.
All right. Bye.